In July 2013, in Mobara City, Chiba Prefecture, Japan, a high school girl suddenly disappeared without a trace. Her family, friends, and teachers were all shocked and deeply distressed. Everyone immediately contacted the police and did everything they could to find her. But what shocked everyone the most was this. After 77 days of being completely missing, the girl was found unconscious inside a small shrine just 400 meters from her home. And the person who discovered her was none other than an elderly man, around 70 years old, who lived in the same neighborhood. Chiba Prefecture, the location where the incident took place, is part of the Kanto region, just over half an hour by train from central Tokyo. It's considered a gateway that connects Japan with other regions and countries, with a population of around 1 million. The area has a lively yet peaceful atmosphere, like an ideal satellite city of Tokyo. The missing girl Sayaka Nakagawa was born in 1996 and lived right in Chiba Prefecture. Sayaka had a fairly peaceful life growing up. Chiba is both modern and poetic in its own way, so the people there are generally well-mannered and well-educated. Sayaka was a prime example: obedient, polite, and respectful. Everyone liked her, especially a 65-year-old neighbor who often praised her, saying, "That girl is so unusually honest. It's rare to find a child like her." Sayaka would often visit and check in on the elderly woman whenever she seemed down. When she entered junior high, Sayaka attended Misaki Middle School, which was about an hour away from home by train. She had a passion for gardening, so she eagerly joined several small agricultural projects at school. Chiba, with its fertile soil and mild climate, is perfect for farming. Sayaka especially loved growing tomatoes, and it was from those very first tomato plants that she began to nurture her dream of dedicating herself to agriculture. On July 11, 2013, a little after 2 p.m., Sayaka harvested a bunch of ripe, juicy tomatoes from the school garden. She put them all into a plastic bag to bring home. On her way back, she chatted cheerfully on the train with her teammates about the upcoming harvest. This time, it would be a big one for sure. A real bumper crop. At around 3 p.m., she arrived at the train station near her home, carrying the bag of tomatoes in her hand. From there, it was only about 2 kilometers to her house. She walked past the station gate, through the usual exit, and then no one ever saw her again. The girl vanished in the most mysterious way. It wasn't until an elderly man in the neighborhood found Sayaka unconscious in a small shrine, just 400 meters from her home, that everyone finally realized she was still alive. Fortunately, even after being missing for 77 days, when almost everyone believed Sayaka Nakagawa was gone for good, doctors at the hospital found no injuries on her body, and her overall health was stable. Her family and neighbors all breathed a sigh of relief. They were overjoyed and deeply grateful that in the end, she had returned safely. But physical health was one thing, her mental state was a completely different story. At that point, Nakagawa was emotionally shattered. She couldn't speak to anyone, not even her own family. When questioned by the police, she didn't respond with words, only nodded or shook her head. They asked, "Were you alone in that shrine?" She nodded, but when they followed up with, "Why were you there?" she fell silent, unable to answer. And that was when people started to wonder, how could Sayaka have survived 77 days in that tiny shrine? Passers-by who had walked by the shrine said there was nothing inside: no food, no water. Her phone had been left behind in a remote location. The shrine had no bathroom, and there were no signs anywhere nearby that she had ever relieved herself in the area. Behind the shrine, there was a mandarin tree, but keep in mind, Sayaka disappeared in July and wasn't found until September. In Japan, mandarins typically ripen and are harvested from early October through late January. In other words, there were no mandarins to eat during that entire time. When Sayaka went missing, she had only about 1,500 yen in her pocket and a few tomatoes she had picked at school. That was all. If she had wandered around looking for food, begging, or trying to buy something, someone would have surely seen her and reported it. But throughout that entire period, not a single report, not a single sighting. So, if what Sayaka said was true, that she had been alone in that shrine for all 77 days, then there was only one big question left to ask. How on earth did she manage to survive that long under such conditions? The questions surrounding Sayaka's disappearance stirred up a storm of public interest across Japan. People began talking, speculating, and soon, one particular phrase kept popping up again and again in conversations. Kami kakushi. Sounds strange, doesn't it? Kami kakushi is a Japanese term that roughly translates to spirited away or mysteriously vanished. But it doesn't just mean someone went missing in the ordinary sense. The phrase carries a spiritual nuance. It refers to cases where children or women suddenly disappear, believed to be hidden by the gods or taken into another world by supernatural forces. In Japan, there's a long-standing belief that if someone suddenly disappears without reason or a trace, they may have been taken by the gods or by spirits into their world. This belief dates back to ancient times, when finding a missing person was nearly impossible, and such unexplained vanishings were often attributed to the supernatural. Remember the famous animated film Spirited Away? In Japanese, its original title is Sen to Chihiro no Kamakakushi, and that's no coincidence. The phrase Kamakakushi is right there in the title. In the film, Chihiro doesn't just go missing, she wanders into the spirit world, swept up into Japan's Shinto beliefs. And once she's there, she begins to slowly forget who she is, forgets her real name, even her true self from the human world. Back to Sayaka's story, people began mentioning Kami kakushi precisely because of where she was found, in a small shrine, after 77 days of being missing, with no food, no water, and yet, when she was taken to the hospital, her physical condition was relatively stable. She was just a little thinner, but mentally, she was completely unwell. She couldn't explain anything clearly, couldn't recount what had happened. It was as if her memory had been wiped clean, and so, a wave of theories began to spread. Some said she had been hidden away by the gods and returned with part of her memory erased. Others believed she'd been taken by spirits to another realm and then brought back. Some even went as far as claiming this was a case of time travel. As bizarre as it all sounds, these ideas actually made Sayaka's 77-day disappearance seem more believable to some people. However, if we set aside the spiritual elements and look at the case from a logical, realistic perspective, it's still filled with strange and inexplicable details. And that's exactly why, even to this day, it remains an unsolved mystery without a satisfying explanation. First, what people find truly baffling is the timeline of the whole incident. Now listen closely to how the timeline unfolds. On July 11, 2013, Sayaka went to school as usual. After school, she took the train and arrived at the station near her home at 3 p.m. That moment was clearly captured by a security camera, but from that point on, she vanished without a trace. The next morning, on July 12th, when Sayaka hadn't returned home, her parents immediately contacted the school and asked for her to be marked absent so they could focus on searching for her. Then on July 13th, with still no news, the family continued their desperate search and requested another day off from school. At this point, you'd probably think the police jumped in right away, right? But no, it wasn't until August 6th, nearly a full month after Sayaka went missing, that the police began questioning people. An entire month had passed. For a missing person case, that kind of delay is huge, far too late for any real chance of tracking down clues that might have still been there. The next day, August 7th, the case finally became a public investigation. Chiba police released Sayaka's photo and called on the public to help in the search. At the same time, they mobilized a team of 31 people to comb through the mountain behind Sayaka's house, working tirelessly with one goal in mind: to find the missing girl. The police also issued a plea If anyone knows anything, no matter how small, please come forward immediately. And yet, on August 9th, just 3 days after launching the search, the police abruptly called it off. Fast forward to more than 2 months later on September 26th. Just after noon, a local gardener went to the small shrine near Sayaka's home to check on the overgrown grass. When he arrived, he noticed one of the offering plaques had fallen down. Suspecting that someone might have broken in or stolen offerings, he stepped closer and peeked inside, and was shocked to find Sayaka curled up on the floor, lying inside. He immediately called the police. Sayaka's family was also notified and rushed to the scene to confirm it was really her. And just like that, after exactly 77 days missing, Sayaka Nakagawa was found inside a shrine located just 400 meters from her home. She was still wearing the same school uniform she had on the day she stepped off the train. At this point, doesn't something feel off to you? First, the police waited nearly a whole month before launching a serious investigation. Second, the search itself lasted only 3 days and then was completely called off. It wasn't a case of scaling down the search or shifting strategies. It was a full stop. For a missing person case involving a minor, that kind of brief, abrupt effort is shockingly short and deeply puzzling. All of this inevitably raises unsettling questions. Was something being covered up? Or was there some reason, something or someone that forced the search to end so suddenly? Second, the strange signs and behavior shown by Sayaka Nakagawa. When Sayaka was found on September 26th inside the small shrine near her home, the first thing the police did was ask her some basic questions to clarify what had happened. But the answers they got were almost nothing at all. The only thing Sayaka could do was nod or shake her head. For example, when investigators asked, "Were you alone in the shrine all this time?" she nodded when asked, "Were you involved in your own disappearance?" She shook her head. Other than that, she remained completely silent. She didn't say a single word more, nor could she provide any details about why she was there or how she had survived for 77 days. This very behavior made the police start to question things. Was it really true that Sayaka had been kidnapped or harmed by someone? Or was it possible that she had run away on her own? Based on her vague and limited responses, the police concluded that it was possible Sayaka had left home on her own and wasn't actually the victim of a crime. At that point, the public began buzzing with questions. Why would a well-behaved high school girl suddenly run away? And if she really wanted to escape, why would she choose a shrine, one that's just 400 meters from her house, as her hiding place? It all sounds pretty unreasonable, doesn't it? And then, amid all the swirling theories, one idea started to gain attention. Could Sayaka's disappearance have had something to do with religion? That question wasn't without merit, especially considering that the place where Sayaka had stayed during her disappearance was a shrine, a site deeply tied to spirituality and religious belief in Japan. And just as people were still puzzled over how Sayaka could have vanished in such a bizarre way, a chilling rumor began to surface, one that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. People began to say that Sayaka's parents were involved in a cult. And if that were true, then all the strange, illogical details up to this point suddenly started to make sense. Here's how the story was spun. Sayaka's parents belonged to a strange cult, a kind of fringe religion quietly spreading in the Chiba area at that time. Sayaka didn't want to follow that path. She might have been a second-generation member born into a family already devoted to the cult, but she rejected those beliefs. Perhaps even deeply despised everything the cult stood for. So she ran away from home, and the place she sought refuge was a small shrine dedicated to Japanese deities, perhaps the only place where Sayaka hoped to find protection and be saved. Now, going back to the investigation, the police were incredibly slow to act, taking a whole month before really starting to investigate. And then, after launching the search, they called it off just 3 days later. That sounds illogical. But if you believe the cult theory, it starts to make more sense. Maybe there were members of that cult within the police force at the time, deliberately slowing down the investigation and cutting it short to keep things from being uncovered. And what about Sayaka? She didn't answer interviews or speak clearly. Maybe it wasn't just psychological trauma holding her back. It could have been fear. Fear that if she spoke out, she'd be forced to return to the cult she was desperately trying to escape. Strangely enough, once you add the religious element to the bigger picture, all the previously tangled details suddenly fit together in an almost unbelievable way. Looking at the bigger picture, people also discovered that a branch of the Unification Church, a controversial cult in Japan, was active in Chiba Prefecture at the time. Shortly after, an article from Jaja Daily claimed that Sayaka was a second-generation member of this cult, meaning she was born into a family that followed the faith. However, it's important to emphasize that this was just a single article with no other media sources verifying the claim, so it can't be fully trusted. What's the truth? No one knows. To this day, Sayaka Nakagawa's mysterious disappearance remains an unsolved enigma, shrouded in all kinds of rumors and theories, from cult involvement to supernatural explanations, from mental illness to kidnapping, and even time travel. Whatever the case, this incident shook Japanese society at the time, forcing everyone to take a hard look. Are we truly paying enough attention to the safety of students? Young people who have to travel far from home every day to go to school? Perhaps it's time for schools, families, and society as a whole to do more to protect these kids. The disappearance seemed to have ended with a lucky outcome. Sayaka was found alive. But if there really is something dark lurking behind this whole story, then clearly this isn't a happy ending, but an unrevealed secret waiting to come to light.